Dr. Manniche, thank you so much for joining me today. You're doing a very important work, and I think it's in these times it's very difficult to do the work that you're doing. So to get started, maybe you could talk about your profession, what do you do, and how did you decide to do studies that are controversial or maybe not so controversial anymore?
I don't think it's controversial. I think what has been done to the public has been very controversial. I'm an MD PhD. My PhD is actually in a rare disease, no fibromatosis Recklinghausen. I've been a doctor for, you know, 35 odd years, for a very long time. And most of that time, I have been very much interested in epidemiology, public health, and the big picture, so to speak, and been working into the field, mainly social medicine and within public health. And when it all started back in March 2020, well, it did start around New Year 2020, but with Wuhan. But when it all started, I did what I always do when something is happening. I go in and read the literature. I go in and kind of put the puzzle together and kind of analyzes where we're going to go. And at that point, I wasn't very concerned because in Denmark, we have like the flu season and that would be in the winter months. And when we had the patient number one, it was in the end of February. So when everyone had their shoulders up here, I had them like down here because I knew that we would never have in Denmark a huge epidemic for a cold virus, which we already knew it was at that time of the year because of the season variation. So I was like, what's going on? I mean, there's no reason for the lockdowns. We only had a very small numbers of people who had the COVID-19 from the test. So it was like, what's happening? And from that on, I was very I didn't really understand how you could lock down a whole country or the whole Western world really on such small numbers. And we already knew that people weren't dying on the streets. I mean, yes, if you had like a comorbidity and all that. So, anyways, so I started looking into the numbers from the start, and I kept being very concerned about how the government and the authorities handled the situation. And then, of course, when we had the vaccines, when we had the placebo, the placebo study from Pfizer about the efficacy, and they had like 20,000 people who had the you could call the experimental injection, but and they were all healthy, and there was always only a follow up on 2 months, and I was like, how come? I mean, this is not proper medical science. This is not how we usually do. Usually, we will go and look at the risk benefit. Usually, we will see, okay, what is the benefits and what are the risks? And here it was like it was only the benefits everyone was looking into, and the risk no one seemed to care. Literally, what is the price for this? In all aspects. So we started to look into the data and follow what happened, and then very soon we saw a batch dependency, not only on Danish data, we saw it also from VAERS in the States. And then we looked into Danish numbers, and then we saw that there was a batch dependency, which means that people who had the batches in the start of the vaccine rollout, which were actually mainly health professionals. Very often lay people will say, "Oh, that was the elderly and that was the vulnerable." No, it was the health professionals. And then we saw this batch dependency, and which shows that you have three groups really, where the ones who had the first batches had a much higher risk of having side effects, also serious side effects, and now we know also death, than the people having the later batches. And the batches in the end, which we call the yellow batches, literally no one had any side effects at all, at least reported side effects. And therefore, we
Interesting.
were like, what's going on? Why is there such a difference? I mean, let's say you buy a Coca-Cola or whatever, and that one batch is bad. Something is wrong with that, batch of Cokes. They will, withdraw the batches from the market literally
Yes.
on the minute.
Yeah.
So this was like, how come no one were concerned about this batch dependency? How come that, it was like, oh no, we don't want to listen, we don't want to see the numbers. And that's actually frightened me as a scientist, as a doctor, as a,
How
just
early did you know about this? How early was it known?
I think the first time, because we actually did reach out to the politicians and the authorities because this was of a great concern. And they kind of just, harassed us or just laughed of it or just kind of silenced us, so to speak, and tried to harass us in any possible way. And I think we're going back to, this is like 21. I think we're going back to the winter of 21, start 22. Our study was out March 23. So, but it was quite soon that we saw
Yeah.
something was happening. And actually, we were looking into the numbers from the beginning, and we could also see we were following death numbers because that has been an issue in the epidemic, so to speak, in 2020. And we could see that when they started, just on a daily basis, that when they started to have the rollout, especially among the elderly, we could see that more were dying in a short period of time. So something was going on, but we knew this from late 21 that there was some kind of a batch dependency. And then we looked more into the data and tried to inform the authorities and the people in charge in the government and the relevant committees, and no one seemed to care.
This is very frightening. And what really makes me angry is when I talk to, and obviously, nothing, all this information, this was more like a conspiracy theory. And also, people were not taking it seriously. And it was completely, people were shut down. Like it was,
Mm.
everybody was quietened. Nobody was allowed to talk
No,
about it. And
no.
even like the fringes, if here, like on Reddit or somewhere, you would hear about it and then
Mm.
nobody would take it seriously. And I remember when I interviewed Trista Martin's parents, and she passed away because of Pfizer, I think. And when her father said that this batch, specific batch, killed, I think
Mm.
he mentioned like 10 people or something, YouTube literally deleted that video
Yeah,
specifically for that information. And that
yeah,
makes me angry because it was accurate information. Even if it
exactly.
was not accurate, let's say it doesn't warrant deletion of the video.
No,
It's
no.
not something that, why are you deleting this video, why specifically for that? And now you're telling us that the scientists, the doctors,
Mm.
you even told the politicians about this,
Mm.
you knew about it, and this was a known information even back in the spring of 2022. this
Mm.
this conversation is happening 2 years later, and even then YouTube deleted that video for that specific information, and that
No,
really
no,
makes me angry.
no, but that makes us all angry because that's also what I mean, I did at one point when we had our first batch study out, we replicated on Swedish data also. And when we put it out the first time, I was deleted from LinkedIn. They wouldn't let me come back because they censored, just the study. I only reported the study, and I don't have the numbers of how many times I've been in the Facebook jail or whatever they call it, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, and you can't do this and that. And X, not well, Twitter is now it's X. X was Twitter was also very terrible. So that's why for me, it was a great personal relief when Elon Musk bought
Yeah.
Twitter, because it opened up for what we knew, that there had been censorship by proxy, that Biden administration had paid Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, the mainstream media to censor. people like myself and my colleagues. And I think that's so upsetting, and I think it should have consequences, because these people who has done this are actually someone you and I are paying to do their job properly. So that was both the authorities, but also the politicians. And they can't say that they didn't know, because we did inform them several times, actually. And instead of listening, instead of taking this serious, we were, as you said, smeared, harassed, personal, harassed. And at one point, the lady who was in charge of the epidemic committee in the Danish government, she actually personally tried to take away my authorization as a doctor. She didn't succeed, but of course, it's not nice to have a personal attack like that. And what I think were her main issue was actually just to try and silence me, because I was a voice they didn't want to listen to, certainly, and still is. I mean, our study, the Bats Dependency study, which came out in March 23, is amongst the most read studies in the whole world, out of more than 28 million studies, not only on corona, but on everything. One of the most read studies ever. No one in Denmark has mentioned it. It hasn't been in the press. It hasn't been in the public area. They have just tried to silence us. Even so that we have replicated the study on Swedish officially data. It has been replicated on Czech data. It has been replicated on US data, and still silence. And I think that's so upsetting, because if they had behaved as they should, if they had taken this serious as they should, they would have withdrawn some of the badges, maybe even halted the whole vaccine rollout. They would have informed the public. They would have behaved responsible, and we could have avoided death. Really, I mean, this is not only about having a little soreness or redness. This is also serious side effects. This is also death among young people also. And now we see with our latest infertility data that this is also a matter of, for some women to have their fertility ruined, maybe for a shorter period of time or maybe for life. We don't know that yet. So I think I mean, I haven't been in a period of time in my long career as life as a doctor, where I've been so upset about how the authorities have been handling this, how the governments has been, the politicians, but also the press, the mainstream media. I think it's so upsetting, and it's, I would say, disgusting. And I think that, it should be prosecuted in one way or another in the end. I think someone should be,
Responsible.
responsible, exactly, because this is very serious, and they can't just say, well, we didn't know. They knew that. They just silenced us and tried to silence us.
And to think about how they were coercing everybody to take this vaccine, knowing it,
Exactly.
making it available in shopping centers. You could
Yeah.
just like go for a shopping and then get a
Yeah.
booster or get the second dose. And then everybody, all the, what
Yeah.
really made me angry was this employers. Like they would say,
Yeah.
if you're not fully vaccinated, you were not offering you an employment. Like you couldn't
No.
even work if you didn't have a vaccine. And you would,
No.
and nobody, like let's imagine like I wanted to get a vaccine and I would just walk into these clinics,
Mm.
and it wouldn't even occur to me as an average citizen, it wouldn't even occur to me that I am literally playing a Russian roulette there.
Mm.
I would,
Exactly.
nobody knew about it.
No.
It's
No.
so out of it's like a fantastical to think that they
It's
are, you're getting an injection that could kill you.
no, but that's. I mean, I have to say also that, where did the public put their common sense? I mean, I have to say, how come that the public was so easily brainwashed? Because that's actually what happened. Because it's like everyone knew that it had only been tested for 2 or 3 months. We had never had that technique before. We didn't know what the risks were in the long run. And we already knew 1 year ahead that people, now we knew even better that they wasn't falling dead on the street. So it was like we already knew that it wasn't that dangerous. How come people were fooled that easy? I mean, the person in power only have that power if we give, in our case, her that power. And that is upsetting also, because we had at one point back here in Denmark, I think a week in November 21, has been, where I literally thought that, we were close, the unvaccinated population were very close to risking going to jail. And the whole way of talking about unvaccinated was very, very aggressive,
Yes.
very, very violent, I would call it. And as you say yourself, we were, you could be fired if you didn't have the vaccine. You weren't invited for social events. Even sports clubs said that if you're not vaccinated, you can't go out on the sea on a sailboat. I mean, it was so upsetting, and we kind of gave the people in power all this power. And I think that's actually frightening, because you may have odd people in power. You may have people who take advantage of having that power. But how come that the public was so blind, so brainwashed? And I think that's, if I had written, I have written many books, but if I had written like a book about this, everyone would say, "Oh, come on, look at that! I mean, how crazy! This is not a true story, so to speak." And then literally within like weeks or days, everyone was like having that staring, like, "Ooh, oh, please stay away. Oh no, I have to measure how far away you are. And if you sneezed or anything, people would get a heart attack. Ooh, someone sneezing, it
Yeah.
was so crazy." And I mean, the only way I can explain it is that when you're afraid, you freeze. And they were very good at fear mongering. They were
Yeah.
very good at making everyone afraid. And if you're afraid, you're an easy peasy, to go and have you do whatever they want you to do. But I still think that people should have kept their common sense, and they should have not forgotten, at least my colleagues shouldn't have forgotten risk benefit, that every other time our whole history, in recent times, has always been look at the risk, look at the benefits, and most of all, do no harm. And here, we certainly did harm the population, and doctors were part of it. And I think also you said yourself that it was everywhere you could get the vaccination. But we have like a very strong principle, which is that I cannot, if you're my patient, I cannot talk publicly about what you're having and not having, and which diseases you're having. And here it was like you would sit at a table somewhere or down in the supermarket, and people would be, "Oh, have you been vaccinated?" And I said, "This is so private information. You might as well say, 'Oh, have you had the syphilis these days?'" I mean, it was so private, and we just shared it like, and if someone didn't have it, "Ooh, how come?" And no, then you can't come here. It was so crazy. And what I think is very interesting also is that when EMA, the European Medical Agency, who gave the emergency authorization for the corona vaccines, when they gave that, they specifically said that this was on a personal matter. People should have it after a doctor has, on a medical appointment, or from, a doctor been involved, and it should be to protect, to prevent hospitalization and death for the person, for the individual. And they specifically said that they didn't have any proof that it would do anything against transmission. So it wouldn't protect any transmission at all. They didn't have any proof, and we still don't have that. And despite that, the governments and the authorities in Europe, in the States, and in the Western world, they misused that, and they went out and told the public that this will prevent transmission. That was a big lie. That this we can make a rollout on everyone, and that was also wrong, because it should have been on an individual indication. So if I were your doctor, you and I could talk, is this a good idea? And then I could give it to you. But instead of that, it was just literally everywhere. And people didn't have the informed consent. They didn't have the information about the batch dependency. They literally just had, oh, bring me your arm, there you go. So I think so much terrible happened. And even so, we had already in May, June 21, this is literally a few months after the rollout started, we had the first data from the States showing that there was the myocarditis, the risk of myocarditis, especially in young, healthy sportsmen and mainly men. And I remember that we had a Danish soccer player, Christian Eriksen, and he died on the while playing. Well, he has his heart arrest, and fortunately he got back to life, and they saved his life. But we knew that they had been vaccinated 2 or 3 weeks before. And when I went publicly and kind of said, this could very well be because of the corona vaccines, I was literally harassed and, threatened and silenced and, making fun of. And I keep saying that, and he didn't want to say anything publicly because, of course, there was something about the insurance and his payment and whatever. But I keep saying that if he had been standing, behaved like a man, responsible sportsman, he should have told the public, yes, that's right, I've been vaccinated 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yes, that's right. We know there's a higher risk of myocarditis, and if you have myocarditis, you can have sudden death, and so on. And if that had been the case, imagine how many lives could have been saved, because of this silencing the myocarditis story. Then young men kept having young sportsmen, also professional sportsmen, kept having the shot, and some of them has died, and some of them will die, earlier than expected, because they did have the myocarditis. And if you have had the myocarditis, there's nothing as a mild myocarditis, because the heart will be scarred, the heart will be damaged. So you risk at some point, maybe not now, but within 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, sudden death. And I think that upsets me, and I think it's so sad, because these young people didn't risk anything of having corona, nothing at all. And the shot didn't protect grandma for transmission. So I think it has and will cost lives, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was um like a fatal scam, like a scam
Yeah,
that
yeah,
led to death. That's the worst, and on such a large scale. And
yeah.
I don't think that I know any athletes, and I've been watching sports for a while. I've never heard like young men athletes just falling and dying on the pitch on sports fields. That was not a thing. It was not a thing.
Well,
That's what did
I
it
mean, we
happen before?
knew, I must say, to be honest, that we actually knew that, I mean, we have had sudden deaths, especially among soccer players, because some of them will actually get a bigger heart. So, but very rarely. So it has been an issue before, actually, and especially among soccer players, but not as this. And also, I think it's always important to look at causality, to look what could be the explanation, and anything else we would talk about it and explain it and try and prevented, going forward. But here we just silenced it, and definitely not in this matter. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, because the professionals, we will hear about that, and we remember when Christian Eriksen, fell on in Parken in Denmark. But there will be lots and lots of young men, young athletes, not being professionals, but still having had the myocarditis. And some of them has died suddenly. Some of them will die, before they should, and so on. So I think that's so upsetting. And now with our latest infertility study, which also is a very big concern, where we just shown, it's just been out online now after peer review, and it shows that women who had the corona vaccine before conception had a 30% less chance of giving birth, which means that the very rapid decline we have seen in many European countries, not all, but in many, around January 22, could, or obviously must in some way be connected to the corona vaccine status. And I think that's also very worrying, that we have these declining birth rates, and at the same time we have actually had, in many countries, also in Denmark, excess mortality for a while. And if you have a population who should survive, you need to have more people being born than dying. And we're just crossing that field now here in Denmark. So for a little while, we have actually had more deaths than birth, which eventually will destroy a population if you at least don't get any migration. So, and I think they are also silencing those data, and that's of a very big concern worldwide. If that vaccine actually did make women, and perhaps also men, less fertile. I don't know if it was deliberately, I don't think so, but we don't know that. But I think that could be very devastating for the future, not only for the person involved, but also for the public, of course.
I personally believe that it's the vaccine because I know someone, a friend of mine. I think she was 24, if I'm not mistaken, and she went to get the vaccine because she had to.
Mm,
She worked so hard to get her scholarship all her life, and she finally got her scholarship. And if she would have not gotten the vaccine, she wouldn't be able to attend the classes. So it was
no,
not really a question for her. It was like, I have worked so hard for this. I have to get this vaccine in order to go and study and get my degree. And when she went to the clinic, the doctor actually turned her away. She
mm,
said, "You are too young,
yeah,
and like I can't give you the vaccine." So she went
no,
back to, I think she went back and told whoever was responsible, like, I was not, they didn't vaccinate me. And they were like, "No, you have to get the vaccine. You have to,
yeah,
like, you need
yeah,
to find another doctor."
yeah,
So then she went back again to tell what she was told. And at that time, there was another doctor, or I think she said, like, the nurse came out and was like, "Okay, like, come, I will give you the vaccine." And then she was vaccinated, and
mm,
then her period was messed up. Like, it was
exactly.
immediate reaction with her period, and
Yeah,
that immediately was like, "Oh wait, that's a direct, like, a result she
mm,
never had." And I asked her, "Did you ever have anything like that?" "No, always
no,
on time." But
yeah,
that time there was like a massive bleeding, which was absolutely unusual.
mm,
And obviously it happened right after the vaccine. What
yeah,
else could have caused? She had corona twice before that. So
mm,
nothing like that happened because of the corona, right? So
no,
it's not the
no, no.
coronavirus.
No, but that's right. But we know that, and we have several studies showing that. So that's documented that many women had bleeding disturbances, and bled too much, and didn't have the usual period, and all that. And that has been documented, and we can see that when we look into the reported side effects, that there's a lot of bleeding disturbances. And the thing is that you don't have to be a doctor to know that if you have like not regular periods, your fertility will be changed, of course, and you will be less fertile, that's for sure. So the problem is, will it get back to normal? And therefore, I think we have an obligation to look into the data. So we have followed the women or looked into the data in a certain period of time, and where we have looked into whether the women before conception were vaccinated, had at least one shot vaccine against the COVID-19, and or if they didn't. And then we followed how many births they gave, and it turned out that the women who had been vaccinated gave 30% less, had 30% less living births. And these were from women from at the age of 18 until 39. So that was in the fertile age, you could say. And of course, there could be many explanations, but one is certainly also related to the corona vaccine status. And we can see that at the same time, in many European countries, also in Denmark, there was a rapid decline in birth rate around January 22, which very well might be explained by what our study is showing, that there is some kind of connection between the corona vaccine status in the woman before conception and her chances of giving birth to a child. But of course, there could be many other causes also, and it could be that women who wanted to be pregnant didn't take the vaccine. But we have to remember that around 50% of all pregnancies are not planned for. So that's one thing. And another thing is that this was an environment, especially actually in the Czech Republic, where the push for the vaccine was very, very strong. And like the push for the children vaccinations are also very, very strong. So this is a country with a very high degree of vaccination among the public. So there is some kind of connection, and what we don't know is whether this is a reversible, whether it will go back to normal, or if this will be a lifelong damage. Time will show. What also frightens me when they silence us and censor us, as they still do, that is that we need someone to take care of these data and keep looking into it and try to understand what is the causality. Why do they get the bleeding disturbances? Is that because of the spike protein? Is that because of the DNA? Is that because of the autoimmune reaction? What is the explanation? Because if we have the explanation, then hopefully we will have a treatment or an antidote or prevention of that. So and I can't understand that people who should be responsible, and probably is on a daily basis, why they are not more concerned about this, because this could be themselves, this could be their daughters, this could be someone they care for and love dearly. So I think it's so odd, because some of these women and couples are dreaming of having a child, and some of them, and we still don't know if it's going to be for life, but some of them certainly have difficulties as it is now to get pregnant, or at least to give birth to a living child. So I think it has such a great impact on public health that everyone should be worried. And at least in Denmark, 90% of all adults have had at least one shot, which I think shows that we are very easily brainwashed in Denmark. But that means that a lot of people should be worried for themselves, or at least someone they care for.
Yeah, I remember I was in Facebook groups where for pregnant women and
Mm.
other people, not doctors, not experts, would comment when a pregnant
Yeah.
woman would ask, "Hey, like I'm pregnant. Do you think I should get the vaccine?" Which is a
Oh,
completely normal question. Like you're pregnant
yeah.
and you ask, "Oh, can I eat this? Should I get
Yeah.
this?" It's a normal
Yeah.
question, and then the
Yeah.
comments would be like, "Yes, of course, it's safe and effective. You should get it." And I remember I saw one of your posts where I said, "I don't want an apology. I want my colleagues to." I think you said that I want them to speak out instead of like
Yeah.
apologizing for what happened,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm not ready. Like, I want them to apologize. I want these people
yeah,
to apologize for what they did, because they were
yeah.
brainwashed, and not only they brain allowed to be brainwashed and they harmed themselves, but they were
Mm,
advocating for pregnant women to get this
yeah,
vaccine. And now we look
yeah,
at the VAERS data, and the
yeah.
miscarriages,
Oh
stillborn
yeah,
is
yeah.
just skyrocketed after the vaccine
No,
introduction.
no, and it's supposed to, and there you go again. What happened to our knowledge? What happened to common sense? What happened to being a good doctor? Because as you said yourself, usually when it's pregnancy, you're very keen on do not eat this, do not drink alcohol, do not smoke, do not do this and that. And here we didn't even have like placebo studies on pregnant women. We all only had the data from Pfizer September last year, and they were very varying. So it's like, how come we lied to the public? How come doctors were blindfolded or brainwashed? And I think and again, what I'm saying, it's like we forgot how to behave. We forgot to how we usually would react in those situations. But I must say that the public also forgot themselves, to think clearly. And then we come back to the fear mongering. But why I'm saying that I don't need an apology is, it's not worth anything. People will come to me and say, also my colleagues, and especially actually to my husband, oh well, we said the same, or we had the same, and we think Vibeke was right from the start, and we agreed from the start, and that's one big lie, because I was very much alone. And when I was harassed and when I was smeared, no one reached out. No one said, "Oh well, I agree," or "I think she has a point." Everyone kept silence, silence. So I'm like, I can't, what to do with an apology? I think it's much more important to come into the field, come into the battle. We can't do the research by ourselves. We need someone else also to be doing this research and look into, on a patient level, a batch dependency, let's say with miscarriages, cancers, different cancers on a batch level. So we need colleagues to kind of wake up and just leave the apology. We can't use it for anything anyway. So we need more to, but of course, I think that it's important to bring someone, to have justice. That's for sure. And I think that some of the people in the governments who lied, literally lied and lied and lied, um, and uh, and some of the people in the authorities, they should for sure. We should try and see how they lied, why they lied, and in what extent that what that price has been, so to speak, and especially some of the politicians. Has been lying to the public, and it's actually the if the judgment, if you're lying to the public, and what you risk is actually very high. So um, I think going ahead and in the future, there must be some court cases, that's for sure. But that's also not that I want people to pay a price, so to speak, but I want justice to win, and I want us to learn something from this. I want that it won't. I want to prevent that it happens again, and therefore we need to have some kind of um, where we go and look into what happened, and learning from it, and as long as we keep silence, and as long as we keep pretending it didn't happen, let's just move forward. And as long as people as myself and my colleagues are censored, nothing would happen. But that's why I'm so happy for what's happening in the States these days. I know it's not political correct to be a fan of both Trump and Kennedy, but I am actually, because people forget or ignore that why Trump won was also because he went into the discussion about freedom of speech, and that he promised that he would give us our, everyone the right of, the freedom of speech, and he wanted to conquer censorship. And I'm also a very big fan of Kennedy, of course, because I think Kennedy has kind of shown that, again, as I said, the balance between the risk and the benefits, and as he keeps calling, which I agree on, good science, that you look into data. And I think our studies are good science in that way, that we look into the big data and we analyze that. But as I keep saying, and when we look into data, is that, let's say it would show the opposite. Let's say that it would show, which it hasn't, but that everyone who had the corona vaccine would live until they were 220 years old. Well, that will be what we should publish then. So you have to keep an open mind. And I actually think that's what Kennedy is doing. And also, I'm very happy for the people he has appointed, because they have been very brave, brilliant colleagues in the last 5 years, and they have also had their struggles and their harassments and their personal harassments from anywhere and everywhere. So in that matter, I'm very relieved about what's going on in the States, because we know that that will also we will have to follow that one way or another in Europe also. So, which we did actually in the Corona. When it started, it turns out that everything we did was actually a copy paste of what they did in the States. So I hope that's the same we're doing now.
Do you happen to have any data or any studies on the outcome, like the result, like what's the word, how the lockdowns and restrictions affected people and their health?
We do have some. We don't have the studies, but there has been published some studies about mental issues, and that young people are worse and have had more mental issues than before, and more loneliness, and more abuse of alcohol and all that. So the lockdowns has certainly had an impact on also mental health, and especially among young ones. But I actually think it's in all ages, but especially among young ones. And there is a lot of data on that already. We don't have it because we have more data on the somatic part, you can say. But
Mm.
but but there's certainly been, and also when we had the lockdown, I said, my husband is also a doctor, and I said to him when we had the lockdown, within 1.5 years we will have excess mortality, because we will have delays in the diagnostic, in the treatment, in the rehab, and everything. And I was wrong, because the excess mortality actually started 1 year and 2 months after, not 1.5 years after. And then we started literally on a date again, May 21. That's where the excess mortality started, in Germany, in Denmark, in Norway, in Finland. It started in many countries. And that was also because of the vaccine rollout, but it was certainly also because of the lockdowns. Because if you don't get your diagnosis in time, if you don't get the treatment, if you don't get the operations, I think in Denmark around 150,000 operations were cancelled. And you're not having a surgery for fun. And people didn't get the rehab. They didn't, have the rehab after the treatment. And that's for sure a price paid because of the lockdowns. And we could also very soon see that some of the people who had a heart attack, that they had a bigger damage of the heart, because they stayed home, they didn't get the treatment. They thought that they were not allowed to go to the hospital, and sometimes they weren't allowed to go to the hospital. So there was definitely, on the somatic part, a very high price, and someone died because of the lockdowns, and that's for sure. But with the mental health issue also, but that's not the numbers we're having, but there has been some studies out already.
It's so interesting. You said that you immediately knew. You
Mm,
knew right away that in 1.5 years there are going to be excess mortality, and I'm sure there are other doctors or experts in the field that knew that right away, just like you. You couldn't be the only
mm,
one who
mm,
had that knowledge and had that experience. And nevertheless, we
yeah,
introduced these lockdowns.
mm,
I just don't understand, how did they justify it at the time? I guess the fear, but was there any, like, science behind, like, now science lost
No,
its all
no,
meaning. I'm so sorry,
no.
but science is not the same anymore, the word science.
No, no science at all. Hang on for a second. Now, no. The thing is, we didn't have any studies at all, and that makes it even worse because let's say that there was studies. I must say that maybe I'm an odd bird, so to speak, because what I have been doing in a big, part of my medical career is within this field, you can say, to kind of put it all together and kind of make, okay, where are we going? What's the big picture of this? And of course, there must have been someone else. They haven't reached out. I mean, there was someone else in internationally, and we all, you could call us friends or have a network for sure. But in Denmark, there wasn't really any, and that's why I keep saying I still don't understand, because I reached out when we had the lockdown. The minute the lockdown was, I said publicly that it was bad and there wasn't any use for it. And I would, and also that we had our constitutional rights, that, how can you do this to the public? Because we have our constitutional rights of the personal freedom, of course, the freedom of speech, your personal belongings and all that. But I would have expected that colleagues would come and stand by me and say, yeah, that this doesn't make sense. But that they just either kept silent, or some of them, tried to, harass me and try to kind of go after me. But that wasn't that many. Most kept silent. But silence is killing you, because if you're silent and you know something wrong is going on, you're actually part of the crime. You actually have,
Yeah,
by law, that if I see you being attacked and I don't do anything, I'm actually part of the attack because I don't do anything. So you can be silently a part of the attack here on the public, and therefore I still think. But then again, brainwash and fear mongering, and
yeah,
it is not easy to go against the tide. It's not easy to go against the public opinion, and
yeah,
I keep discussing that with my colleagues when we meet. How come we managed to do that? And then again, we're going back to, that's because we understood the numbers, we understood the data, we kept looking into the data. And now and then, when I kind of think, okay, can someone else come into the field and do some of the work also? I also must admit that now we have been looking into the data for more than 5 years on a daily basis. And then, of course, you get a certain nose for it, you can say, or a certain, of course, knowledge and competence also. And I think, therefore, it's important that we continue. I think we must continue. We feel an obligation to continue, even so that we still are in the field of having, as an example, all our studies, all our work is being done in our spare time. It's only been economical finance by crowdfunding, no funding at all from government, no funding at all from different foundations or anything, and it's all in our spare time. And I think also that's a little strange that such an important studies, which I think our studies are, and we're having many more data, and we're looking now on all-cause mortality linked to the badges. I think it's at one point very positive that we have managed to do that with such a hard environment, you can say, a difficult environment. But on the other hand, it's also not realistic. I mean, how many years can we proceed in that way? Because it is in our spare time. But then again, I'm proud, and I think everyone who has supported us should be proud also, because the resistance we have been up against, and still is, has been massive. And then I think, okay, but we still manage, and I think that's well done, not only for me and our team, but also for the people who have supported us. And that's what did he say, Leonard Cohen? There's a light in everything. That's where there's a crack in everything. That's where the light gets in. And I feel a little the same with this, that this was a crack in it where the light gets in, and that crack is getting bigger, so to speak. That the light is more light is coming in, and more light is being focusing on what actually happened and the big Corona scam, as I call it. And certainly we need to learn from it and also go after the people involved, especially the one who lied to us.
Yeah, I think as you said, like it's like silence is compliance, and
Mm,
even like in Germany, we have a law where you when you see an accident on the
mm,
road, it's your
mm.
legal responsibility. You need to
Yeah,
go and learn how to do first what is it called, first
yeah, first
assistance or
aid. Yeah,
first aid,
first aid.
yes. So you
Yeah,
it's your job, and if you don't, you can get like a legal notice if you don't
yeah,
help. So
no.
it's the same thing. Like if you see somebody lying, if there is a threat to human
Mm,
life, you need to
mm,
speak up. Like you need to talk about it. Now, I have a little bit of an understanding if somebody like a doctors have a family or they
mm,
have children and they're worried about losing their job because it was really scary at the time.
mm,
Um,
mm,
maybe I do get it, but I don't understand those doctors and experts who attack or who harass. Like I talked to Simon Godek, and he also mentioned how he was, they made up lies about him. They attacked, and it's
mm. Oh
they
yeah.
took away his bank account. Just crazy
Mm,
things happen. Like
yeah,
all these
yeah.
in Canada truckers, they were
Oh yeah.
protesting against COVID, and there's just
Mm,
one person comes with a flag, and then the whole people, they lost their bank accounts, like access
mm.
to money.
Crazy,
Things
crazy.
that happened were
Yeah.
absolutely crazy and
No, no.
illegal.
No, and that is the thing, of course, when they try to take my authorization away from me, of course. I mean, you're worried and you're like, this is unfair, and how, why should I be treated like this? But I must admit, that when I saw that there's pattern in this, because what you think when it's yourself, you think, oh, that's only me, it's only me they're going after. But then I realized that the pattern they follow, the way they harassed me, the way they stalk me, the way they, try to take away my authorization and try to make, everything impossible, or at least impossible. It was actually the same pattern they followed in the States with people like Peter McCulloch, Ryan Cole, Pierre Corey. I mean, it was literally like if they had like a manuscript. So the authorities in Denmark kind of followed the same manuscript as they did in the States. And then I realized when they told their stories, I was like, no, this is my story. And I just realized that they try to silence us exactly the same way. And when you realize that, you kind of revitalize, you can say, and say, okay, is that how it is? Then it's not only me personally, then it's a part of a much bigger pattern.
Interesting. So it's like scripted. It's like there's like they
Exactly.
already there's like a preparation organized because it's organized, right? So they already know what to do. So if you have A, do B. If this happens like this, we will do this.
Or,
So you
or,
cannot.
or, or they were told. I mean, that could be also
So
that they were told. I
yeah,
think that what it was all about is also that they had kind of a blacklist. They had kind of go after her, go after him, silence him, silence her. And we know that from the Biden administration, that they gave names to the social media and to the press. Don't let them have any, airtime and all that. And I think also they did that with the authorities, go after her, do this and that. And in my case, it was like literally nothing. I mean, they might as well have said, well, we're going after you because there's a Monday, that's a weekday. So it was so crazy. And I know that from my other colleagues also. But then again, that's frightening. And I'm like, these people involved, how could they do that? I mean, how could they literally sit and pretend to themselves, oh, we got a case? No, there wasn't any case at all. But still, they continued and used a lot of energy on it. And then again, brainwashed, someone told them to, someone forced them to. someone paid them to. I don't know. But there's certainly a pattern. And in some way, it does, it actually kind of made me feel like, okay, this is not only me, this is a part of a bigger scam. And then it's maybe easier to combat. But of course, you're right. We did risk a lot. And I'm like, no, I don't understand if people have children. I have children myself. No, I don't understand if they risk their authorization. I risk my authorization also. I think if anyone and everyone was so scared, as most of my colleagues were, we might as well just close down the whole field of doctors. So I think we need brave people, and that's not only me. We need brave people in a large scale, because if we all like, oh no, that's, can you do it instead? Then you or me could be killed on the street and no one would care. So I think we need brave people, and we need people to stand up for what they know, and for other people, and to take care of other people. I think, and we need solidarity in that way, that if we are in the same field and someone are brave and talking out from what he or she knows, I think we need to support those people, because of course the most easiest part is not to do anything. And quite often when it was very bad or worse, my husband would ask me, do you think it's all worth it? I mean, is it worth all this harassment and stalking and threats and all that? And of course, now and then I would say, oh, well, is it? And then I would give it like half a second and say, well, I'll have to. I have this knowledge, I have this insight, I have this competence. That's what I can do. And if I become silent, no one is taking over what we're doing. So we just have to continue. And I know that from my colleagues, especially in the States, some of them have paid even much higher price than I have, also on the personal level. And they have had the same kind of spirit, and the same kind of feeling, we can't give up. And for some of them, I think the price has been very, very high, and it's been so unfair. So there you go. It's not enough with an apology, but we have to learn from it. That's for sure. Otherwise, it's going to happen again.
Yeah, that's what scares me because it really showed how people behave. Like on your level, doctors and experts level, it's one thing. You're risking your career, you're
Mm,
risking your reputation, but on just the public, even I remember feeling scared of
mm,
random people on Facebook. So it was
yeah,
like so psychological. This psychological
mm,
operation was so good that
mm,
even I remember I wanted to message this pregnant lady who was asking, should I get the vaccine? I remember having the urge saying, maybe you should wait. This because at the time I had no idea. I'm not a
no,
doctor. I had no idea, but I had a gut feeling
no,
that it's experimental. Maybe it's for pregnant women. Like
mm,
no, I wanted to message it, but I remember having fear of being
mm,
aggressively attacked, and
mm.
now I think it was just on Facebook. It was this people, I didn't know this people, but the fear was real. This
No,
attacks
and you
so
were. I think you were both attacked, and I also think someone was watching you, so to speak. I mean, someone was definitely at the minute you were negative, they would do something, and they were definitely watching you. And I thought the other day when Macquarie said, when they looked into FDA data, he said that they could see that anything who had anything with side effects with the vaccines in FDA, if there was anything that could, it was taken as vaccine hesitance. And he said that either it was censored, blocked, or they slow walked, as he said, that, within FDA. And I think that's exactly what happened, that and therefore they also knew her and him and so on, we should look after, and they shouldn't have try and silence them, try and lock them, close down their accounts on Facebook or put them in jail. I mean, they certainly has been watching people like ourselves, and we should just say, yes or no, or, just a little thing, and they would close down, which they did with me on LinkedIn. They literally kicked me off and wouldn't let me come back. And, with even that I appealed their decision, they kept, no, no, you can't come back. And I didn't, put pictures of me naked or anything, or being rude, or telling people off. I just put out our study, of our bad study, and that was it. And they took me off. So I think it has been more. There has been a higher pattern, and there has been someone, maybe on a national level, international level, and both. There has been someone asking them to do something against, personal persons like me, and others. That's for sure, and we know that already from the Twitter files also. So I think that scares me, because we know from, it's like in the communist world. My family had to flee from the communist regime, and this has been even worse, I think. I mean, it was very bad. My mother grew up with a Danish father and a mother from Switzerland, but they lived in Romania and Bucharest, and they had to flee from the Communist Party because they were Danes. And afterwards, of course, we follow very closely what happened in Romania. But this is like tenfold worse what happened, like what did in the communist time, which was very, very bad. But this was even worse also, because this also had fatalities, and even more publicly fatalities. So at least in Romania they tried to hide the people they killed, but here, they didn't even try and hide it. They almost were proud of what they were doing against the public. So for me, it's even worse. And I know that people kind of say, "Oh no, you can't. It was very bad in the communist countries," but literally this was, I think, worse. And also, people, which were also the thing in Romania. If I knew something about you, I would tell that to Stasi, and I would tell them, what you did wrong. So all this watching, it was exactly the same here.
Yes.
People
Yeah.
were, if they knew you were unvaccinated, they would go to the boss and,
Yeah.
"Well, she's not
Yeah.
vaccinated," and and the boss will call you in and fire you, and uh,
I had
even
a
worse.
real fear. I had a real fear of people finding out I was unvaccinated. Now, in
Yeah,
retrospect, I'm like, "Oh my god, that was not normal. That's
no,
not
no,
normal fear."
no,
Like, I had a
no.
fear, literal
Yeah,
fear,
yeah,
talking that I'm not vaccinated, and I
no,
felt over time, I realized I became it became a kind of like a first of all, it was a resistance. I'm like, "I'm not
mm,
gonna do this because I feel
no,
I'm being cursed, and I
yeah,
don't wanna do this," and I could have this gut feeling that something is wrong here, and I didn't do, although it was massive, is the way
yeah,
that we were affected as a family for not being vaccinated were big.
yeah,
But I remember walking and feeling like a second citizen. I
mm,
couldn't go to the shops. I remember there was this beautiful shop I used to go and kind of feel good,
mm,
like buy
mm,
something nice for myself, or I would go to a beauty salon to get my hair done, or I
mm,
would take my kids to swimming activities or something. Nothing. I felt like
no,
a second class citizen. I felt
yeah,
like a citizen it's like a segregation. You're like segregated.
exactly,
You're not
exactly.
allowed here.
You're
It
not.
was
You're not allowed. You're dirty. You're a bad person. You're bad. Exactly. And that is also very terrifying. And again, as I said before, because no one were actually supposed to know whether you took the vaccine or not. They were not even allowed to ask you, because it's a personal matter. And that's also why I think the world went crazy, as I said before, because usually you're not allowed to ask for your health issues, and even more to demand you, and also on as employee. So I think just the whole world went crazy for many reasons.
Yeah, and the hosts like on TV shows, they were saying, "Oh,
Mm.
if you're not vaccinated, you should not get a place in a hospital. If you're not
No, no,
vaccinated, you
no,
should not."
no.
Remember all these
Yeah,
shows that were
so
saying
aggressive,
horrible
so
things.
aggressive. And we even had our prime minister said, well, she wanted it to be difficult for the unvaccinated. I mean, she was so evil. I mean, she was so terrible. But of course, I literally had one time when she gave a press meeting, and I thought, what if she says, go kill your neighbor if she or he is unvaccinated? And I literally had that feeling that if she would have said that, someone
Oh
would
my
have
God.
done it.
Yes.
Because the fear mongering and the brainwash and the way of telling, no, they should have a difficult life.
Yeah,
They are the bad
the
ones. They
problem.
are the enemy. And
Yes.
uh,
Yep, yep. They made us enemies. They made
yeah,
unvaccinated enemies. And
yeah,
there's actually a video, and I think it's a real one, where a lady refused to put on a mask, and two
mm,
security guards, like, they
yeah,
injured her. They kicked her
yeah,
in the elevator, and she
yeah.
died.
Oh,
I
and
mean,
she
these two
almost,
security men wouldn't have done that thing, wouldn't have attacked her for not wearing a mask. For
no,
the love of
no,
God, I
no,
mean,
no. But
what
it's so sad. But I also think it's sad that we have become so easy to brainwash. And I think, and that's the depressing part. And it's also going back to my colleagues. I think, I mean, at one point, I had a birthday, and usually we will have a birthday party. And lots of our friends are doctors as ourselves and professors and so on. And I said, I don't want to have the party. I don't want to see those people. And my husband said, well, can't you forgive? Can you forgive? I mean, what is the problem? And I said, yes, I can forgive, but I can never forget. And the thing is, these brilliant doctors, professors, and they were silent, and they didn't speak up, and they didn't reach out. Not for me personally, but in the bigger picture. And I'm like, how come brilliant doctors like those weren't able to look into the data, to understand the science, to have an interest? And therefore I said, it's not that I can't give, but I can't forget. And I think that's important. We shouldn't forget what happened. We shouldn't forget that doctors just stopped, talking about, and just pretended everything were fine. We shouldn't forget how employees were treated, how people were treated in the families, not allowed to come to parties if they were unvaccinated. It's important that we don't forget and that we learn out from it, because it has nothing to do with forgiveness, but we have to remember what happened and try to understand how brainwash actually works, because it was the same in the Nazi time. I know that people get upset and say, oh no, don't talk about Hitler. But for me, it was the same, because that was also brainwash. That was also someone saying, do this and that. And, the majority actually followed that, not because they were evil people, or not because they had an IQ on like a baby, but because they were brainwashed. And I think the brainwash part is very important to learn something from.
Yeah, and I also noticed that we were primed for this kind of brainwashing, because we live in a world where we're isolated. Because when I grew up, I grew up in a house where our doors were always open, and
Mm,
neighbors would always come in, and everybody would come in, and there was a talk. Everybody would be talking. Oh, have you heard this? Have you heard that? What
yeah,
about this? What about that? There was always communication and discussion
mm,
going on, and TV would be maybe like in the evening for half an hour. We would watch TV, and the news were maybe like in newspapers. But now everyone is isolated in their own homes with the big
yeah,
TV screens, and then
yeah,
from TV they're screaming how people are dropping dead in
mm,
China, how people are
mm,
dying in hospitals, and then
mm,
you're isolated. You don't talk to
yeah.
your other
No,
people who can.
exactly. And then you put on the mask, then you talk even less because we can't communicate with the mask. But you're right, but that's also what I'm worried about, that we kind of forgot the democratic conversation. Because if we have had that, it was actually very clever to make the lockdown, because then you and I wouldn't discuss that it's all crazy. then we would just sit in our fear and watch, ooh, someone is dying, ooh, and another one is dying, and then we could watch Netflix the rest of the time, so to speak. And I think that's actually a big issue these days, that we kind of forgot the democratic conversation. We forgot the right to disagree, because nowadays it's like, if I go somewhere and kind of, then we all should not like Trump. And the minute I say, well, he might have some qualities, it's like,
You're not allowed even to say
well,
that. Yeah,
silence, it's silence. What is he saying? And I'm saying, well, let's have the democratic conversation. Let's discuss what's pro and cons. But no, you're only supposed to have like one feeling, or
exactly.
one opinion. And that's frightening, because that has nothing to do with democracy. That is dictatorship. That this is how we think and feel.
It's funny how you said that. That it means we think we live in democracy, but we
Mm.
created our own dictatorship. We created
Exactly.
it ourselves.
Yeah. And we forgot the art of disagree, because it is an art. It is an art to disagree and to have a respectful conversation and disagree. And actually, I was in the States recently, actually meeting up with Peter McCulloch also. And at that point, I realized that I started having, just trying to ask people I didn't know about, especially the vaccinations, of course, but also other stuff. And I realized that at least the people I met kind of had, because that they have these Democratic and Republicans, and they have like CNN and Fox, they are used to disagreements. They are used to that. They have to discuss that. And I actually felt that they were much better in disagreeing than we are, at least in Denmark, where we're not allowed to disagree. Because they have these, or either you're a Republican or Democrat. So
Mm.
you kind of, in some way, have a training in disagreement. I'm not saying that is perfect, that's for sure. But I just thought it was a relief, actually, to being allowed to disagree and
At
have a
least, yeah.
discussion, and a respectful discussion. Because very often it's actually when we disagree that we ourselves maybe change our minds, or put an add on, and kind of evolve in whatever we are doing. So I thought that was interesting. I'm definitely longing for more democratic conversations, which, going back to our studies, has not been allowed us. I used to be, well, I am still a public person in Denmark, but I used to be a very public person before the mainstream media would ask me about this and that, anything which had anything to do with public health, women's health, children's health. They would call me and ask me for this and that. And literally on the minute, they censored me, and have done that the last 5 years. And I'm longing for that democratic conversation, also with our studies, because of course you could say, well, this could be the cause, this could be, or that could be the explanation. That's fine. Let's have that discussion. But when you censor it, when you say, no, we will not talk about it, we will not listen, then the conversation disappears. And I think that's upsetting.
What do you think? Well, okay, so we know that there are lots of labs that are now doing gain of
Gain of
function.
function, yes.
Yeah. So we know that there are viruses, right? Be it
Mm.
on purpose or not. How how should we as a public, what should we expect? Let's say, what's the right way of having the pandemic?
I think, first of all, which I understand, is that now they have stopped all support in the state to gain of function, and they have actually been a very big contributor to the gain of function studies. I think eventually we will probably see another a virus, man-made virus, because they're out there and it's just, going to happen. What I think is important to learn out of this and kind of keep calm, so to speak, and say, okay, what can we do, what is the issue, what about the treatment, keep an open mind, have focus on the vulnerable. We had a little thing about it in when we had the measles outbreak in Texas, where it was suddenly all about, are you vaccinated, non-vaccinated? And I kept saying also on the inner lines, for the group in the States, I kept saying, well, let's go back and remember what we usually do when people are sick. If you're sick, stay home. And therefore I think we could have done a lot, kept the environment, kept the society open and said, well, if you feel sick and have a contagious disease, stay home until you're well. So kind of not isolate in that matter that you isolate in a unit, but more telling people to stay home until they're well again. So I think there's a lot we could do if it happens again. And what we
What
should
if
have.
it's gonna Yeah, what if it's going to be like the actual virus that's gonna be as bad as they said coronavirus is? What's gonna be for real this time? What would be the correct way of doing it? The
I mean,
pandemic rules.
if it was the same impact. I mean, if it was the
No,
same kind of virus,
no, the actually people were dropping dead, and
I
and
don't
because we
think
were
that's going
shown
to
fake
happen.
videos, right? We were shown fake
Yeah,
videos in China,
yeah,
people
yeah,
dropping dead,
yeah,
and how
yeah,
it where people are dying in hospitals. But
yeah,
turns out it was like the bad
yeah,
hospital protocols with remdesivir and other
yeah.
stuff, all like isolation. So what if it was real this time? Like, what should we expect as public? The correct way.
The thing is, first of all, we should expect to have independent scientists. I mean, we should have someone we could trust. And I personally don't believe that that would happen. That we will have such aggressive viruses. I think it's more like a science, sci-fi story because they're working on viruses for sure, but they won't be that aggressive because what happens and what also happened with the coronavirus is that very rapidly it mutates into a
Oh,
less dangerous virus. So that was also the case when they talked about 1, 2, 3 mutations of the virus. That was not the case. There was like millions of mutations along, literally, in a second it mutate until a less virulent, and dangerous virus. So I'm not worried that way. I still think that it's the opposite, that if something happens again, we should step back and kind of say, okay, take a deep breath. What are the proper data? What are the actually, threat, so to speak, and make sure that we have independent scientists and also that we have like no one censored. Because going back to March 20 in Denmark, if I had had a voice, which I had before that, in the Danish public, we would never have had the lockdowns. We would
mm,
have had again a democratic conversation, also among peers, also among doctors, and then you could sit and say, "Oh, I think okay, then I will do this and that." Then you would have another another. Scale of information that you could decide yourself. So I think I'm not afraid of having a very aggressive virus. And as I said before, it would mutate and it would mutate into less aggressive. So I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about the handling. And that's why I think it's so important to learn from this, have the public discussion, which we still haven't had, and then from that decide, okay, when it happens next time, we're gonna do this and that and make sure that we don't have the fear mongering, but instead, keep calm, shoulders down, and then, as I said, isolate. If you're sick, stay home, and life can continue. So I'm not worried. I don't think that's going to happen. But that's also because some of the narrative was that there was only a few mutation, and then we had this kind of virus and this kind. But the thing is that it did mutate all the time, and to a less dangerous virus. So I'm not worried about that.
right. So I think it's important to just be healthy as well. I think I've noticed also healthy people, they had like less symptoms with
Yeah,
coronavirus. So
yeah.
just stay healthy, stay try to be home if you and then if we hear all this like monkeypox or oh now this is happening, now
Mm,
that's happening,
mm, mm.
it always helps just to okay, let's relax. Is it real? Maybe give it a
Yeah,
few days or weeks
yeah,
or months and
yeah.
just calm. And I
Mm,
think it's
yeah,
helps also when you have a fear. Is there like a maybe like a psychological way of when you experiencing fear, you
mm,
always go to this fight and flight mode, right? And then
mm.
that really is difficult to be rational when you are
Yeah,
in that
exactly.
mode.
Yeah.
So what could help?
No, but as you said yourself, I think it's important to stay healthy. I think it's important that you get your sleep. We very actually very quick we saw that sleep actually, and we know that sleep makes your immune system much better. Sleep does conquer fear and makes you happier and all that. And I think coming back to that, I think it's very important. Stay healthy, get your sleep, get outside, get enough sun so you get the D vitamin, stop smoking, stop drinking. And that's what I said also. Why not use this situation to kind of get public health better? Why not
Yeah,
say, okay, you need to go outside, you need to walk 30 minutes at least every day. You need to drink less. You need to smoke less. You need to love more. You need to sleep more. Kind of what makes you healthy. And instead we
yeah,
did exactly the opposite.
yeah,
So I think we could definitely do a lot ourselves also. And most of all, uh, keep our common sense, because if someone else months before have said, well, I got something here. I don't know how it's working. I don't know how the efficacy is. I don't know if it will hurt you in the short time or the long time. I mean, who on earth would have said, oh, well, you just give it to me there? And a new technique. And even so, even more if they had said, oh, any pregnant women, oh, well, let's have her have a shot also. Any children, let them have it also. I mean, if we were sane before all this, we would have said, oh, that's going to be a big no, thank you. And here, even children were vaccinated, which of course is of a great concern. So I think most of all, we should keep sane if it happens again. And as I said, listen to me.
yeah, yeah. I think it's
No,
very
no,
important that somehow. So what my fear is, Facebook completely took
yeah,
over. They
yeah,
shut down every single voice, so you couldn't get any truth from Facebook,
no, no,
Twitter. So I'm worried. How are we gonna find these voices? How like you? How what platform? All platforms are taken
yeah,
over, and you don't know what to
no,
expect from Elon. You never
no.
know.
No, no, you're right. And even so, you can see even AI is also having some kind of censorship.
Bias.
And that's why I think it's important to have social media somewhere and support those, like if it's Rumble, if it's X as it is now, and it's important to support those people. I mean, Elon Musk, if you see him, he's under such a big attack all the time. People are trying to ruin his business, people are trying to ruin him. And I'm so grateful for him that he bought X because, as I said, it was so important. So I think we just have to, on a daily basis, support whoever. Give us the freedom of speech and also talk about the right of freedom of speech. If going back to Trump, you can see the Danish press didn't even, I knew that he was going to win. I knew that he would win, especially also because of the freedom of speech, which were an agenda certainly in the States. But here in Denmark, no one mentioned that. No one even mentioned that he talked about freedom of speech. They didn't mention the censorship by proxy, that Biden paid so many billions to Twitter and all that. They even censored the stories about censorship. And therefore, I think it's so important for us to speak up, to try and conquer censorship, to talk about how it ruins democracy, to try and find out who is censoring us, and keep uh, giving the freedom of speech. And freedom of speech is also for someone who says the opposite. if you said, well, I love to have the vaccine, I can't live without my mask, well, then you should be allowed to say that, because that's part of the freedom of speech. And that, then going back to Trump, and he says that again and again, well, people are allowed to have the freedom of speech. That is not the same of being allowed to wishing someone else dead or being a threat to someone else. That's certainly something else. But a democracy, the core in a democracy, that is certainly freedom of speech. And I think we should try and do whatever we can to protect that. And the people who has been censored, as myself, as other colleagues, we should give them their voice back. And that is a way of preventing that is going to happen again. That's at least how I see it.
Yeah. I think like what you just said, it just makes me so like we had such a great opportunity to, as you said, to have people change their lifestyles, right? To stop
Yeah,
smoking and
yeah,
consuming. We had such a great opportunity, wasn't it?
mm,
Like it was a
yeah,
great place to say, hey, like go get vitamin D because people walk
yeah.
around with such a low vitamin D and instead like going doing some sports, and that actually
Exactly.
was data that showed that
Yeah.
coronavirus could have been
No,
much better.
you can't go to sport. No, you can't go outside. No, no, that was so crazy. But I said that. I thought this is an opportunity to tell people, what can you do to make yourself more healthy? But they didn't catch that one. They weren't interested in that one.
It would have been so effective, like because everybody had fear, so you could use that
Exactly.
fear into a different direction and get people
Exactly.
healthy and have
Exactly.
better mental health instead of causing death, injury, and now infertility in women. This is
And loneliness and abuse of cigarettes and whatever, fentanyl and whatever they can get. So I think, but then again, if the public health really was the matter of concern from the
yeah.
authorities, from the governments, they would have used that opportunity. Even in the light of lockdowns were never used for, but they could still have said, okay, now you're there, do this and that, make yourself more healthy, get your sleep, don't be afraid. That I would have said, shoulders down, don't be afraid. And that's actually what I kept saying on all my videos when I started making videos. Get your shoulders down, don't be afraid, be happy now, get your sleep, do this and that, instead of just be afraid, because people were very much afraid, and that's killing you. And it's killing your creativity, it's killing you literally. You can't be afraid all the time. You need to enjoy every heartbeat. You need to enjoy every moment you have on earth. I mean, look at that, 5 years in a fear jail, you could say. 5 years where the fear mongering has never been more intense than it was. And then we had the war in Ukraine. Now we have the war in the Middle East. It's like you have to be afraid all the time. And I deny to be afraid, because we can't be afraid all the time. We need to celebrate life. We need to embrace life. We need to get more love and life and laughter, because in the end, you don't know how many years anyone has left. And therefore, I think it's so important that they don't rob our life with, and don't disturb our life with all that fear mongering, which it has been. And if
Mm.
someone wants to support us, this has only been by crowdfunding, but then we have like a Go Buy Me Coffee, or what's it called? But we have like a link. I could send that to you if
Yeah.
someone wants to support us, because it's all based on crowdfunding. We are now a team of independent scientists coming from Denmark, Sweden, Czech Republic, and the Netherlands and US. And we are looking into now all-cause mortality linked to badges. We're looking into some of the special diagnosis. We're very much interested in the turbo cancer discussion. We're very much into the cardiology, like sudden death. And we're also looking into the DNA contamination. So we it's spreading in many areas, but we are a group of scientists, and I think we have a lot of varying data still we are in the process of having it published. But because it's quite a struggle. I mean, this is like, I think, number 7 journal, and the only one who actually sent our study for peer review, and we had a very good peer review. But and just shows that the censorship is also within the medical journals, and therefore I very well understand when Kennedy says that they want to look much more into which journals they are supporting, because the censorship has also been very immense in among the medical journals, and we have certainly felt that with our studies. It has been very difficult to get the chief editors to just send it for peer review, because we know that the studies are well done. We know that it's a very high quality. So if they would send it to peer review, our chances of having it, with a good peer review was very high, which this also shows, and also our other studies. But the main issue has been that the chief editors hasn't even bothered to send it for peer review, again, because of the censorship.
And this is happening even now in
It is
2025.
happening even now. I hope that the next one will have out, which will be about all-cause mortality linked to the badges. I hope that it will be easier. But I would have hoped that for this one also. Now we can celebrate that it's out after peer review, and that's a big relief. But I also think that the public has a right to have these data. They need these data, and because of what the authorities and the governments put them through, I think also they have an obligation to give the public these data and this knowledge. And I certainly think that the mainstream media also have an obligation, because they have been part of the lying. They have been part of telling just one story, just focusing on one part of the narrative. So I think people have a right to have all this information now, and they should have this information, and hopefully next time it will be easier. And we just have to celebrate that it's out now, and I'm very grateful for that. So that's nice.
Yeah.
But I'll
Well,
send
thank
you
you
the
so
link.
much.
Yeah,
Yes, please do. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for all the work you have been doing. Yeah.
thank you very much, and thank you
Thank
very much for having me.